We appreciate you joining us today and giving some information to our members. I will continue to let people in from the waiting room as they sign on, and we would just ask everyone to try to keep their microphones muted. And as we go through, if we have a question, if you can use the raise your hand button, and we'll try to manage through that. Alex, Javier, do you guys want to do questions throughout or in the end? Just want to manage time and
yeah, however is best for you.
Okay.
We're good.
Okay.
So you ready to start now?
Yeah.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for doing this. I think this is important. We really appreciate the chamber doing this. And my name is Alex Sanchez, President and CEO of the Florida Bankers Association. This is about our 36th webinar that Javier, George, and I have done together since the Paycheck Protection Program was created. And want to, of course, thank the president for this, Secretary Mnuchin, our own Senator Marco Rubio, who wrote this part of the CARES Act, and then Senator Scott, who was supportive of this, of course. And this was written and passed and became law to help small businesses get through this pandemic crisis. It wasn't your fault. You were rocking and rolling. You were doing very, very well. And yet this happened. And now, our economy now through the leadership of our governor is starting to reopen again. But you were there without customers for 2 months. So Javier and I have done this for, thousands of small business owners throughout the state of Florida. And we're glad we're doing this at home here in Tallahassee, which we all love very much. And so any small, my word of advice, and Javier, I'm going to call on him here in a minute to get into some of the details, but a couple of points I want to share with every small business owner here. Please apply. If you have less than, there's no big businesses here in Tallahassee, so you've got to be less than 500 employees. I know you are. Please apply. Bankers like Sammie, who's on the line, and other bankers, Capital City and all our banks, Truist, Bank of America, all our banks here in town have processed thousands upon thousands of these loan applications to help small businesses. And what do I mean by that? So there's been two rounds, round one, and now we're in round two. In round one, Florida was number 3 in the nation with 89,000 small business applications approved for a total of $18 billion in approved dollars. That placed us in 4th place in dollars, slightly below New York, even though we had 8,000 more loans accepted and approved than New York. But it shows the cost of living is much higher up there. And then in round 2, which was what we're in now, Florida is number 2 in the nation. I'm very proud of that because our bankers have been working around the clock since the first PPP loan date was announced of April 3rd. Our bankers were working around the clock that weekend, the 4th and 5th of April. The following weekend, which was Easter weekend, our bankers were uploading. And that's why we're number 2 in the nation in round 2. With, you ready for this? 222,570 loan applications approved by the Small Business Administration to help small businesses in Florida. And that's number 2 behind California. We're number 4, slightly below Texas in approved amount with $13.4 billion. Added to the 18 billion plus in round 1, we have bought back over $32 billion to help small businesses in Florida get through this crisis. So in round 2, there's still about 100, last count we had, there's still about $120 billion, $120 billion left still in the fund. But it's going to disappear. And so you've got to get that application in. I recommend you go to your local FDIC bank here, whoever you bank with. Go to any FDIC bank in Tallahassee. It's a 2-page loan application. It's pretty easy to fill out. and apply. Uh, you know, there's no negatives to you there. I mean, you know, some bigger companies have applied. You know, Harvard University somehow, I don't know how they got this, but you know, they gave the money back. But the money is for our small businesses. In round two, the loans have averaged 76,000 per loan. So the money's getting there to help our small business owners get through this. And it'd just be a shame if you haven't applied. It really would. And that's the whole purpose of this webinar. So, you know, I'm going to pass it on to Javier. Javier, you can go through the mechanics for each small business owner, you know, how to apply, what it entails. That would be great. And then I'll make some other remarks later. Thank you, Javier.
Of course, and thank you, Alex, and thank you for all for allowing us to share this information with you. And it's been a rocky 6 weeks. I can tell you that. It seems that we've been working harder. The word banker's hours completely changed, right? We're not working 8 hours a day anymore. It ends up being 16 and through weekends as well. That being said, as Alex alluded to, we thought the monies would have run out by now. So this is actually a great opportunity for those who haven't applied or taken full advantage of the PPP request. And additionally, I would like to talk about some of the loan forgiveness components that we know right now. As I'm sure you're all aware, a lot of the information has been continually updated, and we are expecting further guidance on several of these items. So that's the only caveat that I would like to put regarding the PPP program in general. That being said, I'm looking at some of the questions that we have. A lot of this information on who can apply and how to apply is readily available on Treasury's website directly. I can provide with the Chamber those email addresses, or website addresses in order to get the updated information and share with the group. But long story short, if you are you have employees or you're self-employed, either or, and you're not you have W-2 income or you receive a 1099, you all are eligible for PPP, right? The process in which you apply is slightly different for each category. If you are a business that has W-2 payroll expenses, we're going to be looking at your primary entity or your business as the vehicle for receiving the PPP loan. If you are a 1099 recipient or a sole proprietor, we're going to be looking at you individually as an applicant for the PPP loan. So for the business, what we're going to want to see is your 12 months of trailing payroll or 2019 full year payroll expenses and underlying eligible payroll expenses that can be supported. So payroll, healthcare benefits or retirement support or healthcare support to employees also count as part of your payroll cost, which is then averaged out on a per month basis and then multiplied 2.5 times to give you what is considered your PPP loan amount. And that is supposed to give you 8 weeks of payroll support, an additional 25% that's eligible for eligible uses like utilities, mortgage interest expense, and rent or leases that were in place, all of which are in place prior to February 15th. Now, let's say you're a sole prop, right? You run your business through your personal tax return. What you're going to want to do is provide the bank your 2019 Schedule C. And your PPP loan will be based off your earnings, not your payroll. So whatever your bottom line net income earnings are from your Schedule C, you take that number, you got to cap it at $100,000, or if you can't go beyond that, and then you divide that number by 12. And then you multiply by 2.5 times, and that is now your PPP loan request number. Same thing applies for independent contractors, whether they file it through their individual tax returns or through their business tax returns. The same filing process will be allowed. A couple key points. The rules are pretty standard, well, as standard as they've been, but all banks have similar requirements. They might be slightly different from institution to institution. One of the reasons why Alex is very adamant about applying at the institutions that you currently have a banking relationship is you skip a step in the process by doing so. If you already have a relationship with the institution you're applying with, then we don't have to do increased BSA, Bank Secrecy Act, regulatory compliance components, and beneficial ownership review. So that helps the bank that you're applying with by skipping that, so it speeds it up. One of the other things that is, critical in my experience as far as making that process smooth is you can provide the bank a breakdown of how you calculated your loan, right? So you tell us exactly what numbers you used and from what source and the math on how you got there. That way our underwriting team isn't trying to come up with a number that you came up with. All we're doing is just checking your math. And if your math is correct, then guess what? Your PPP loan will get approved fairly quickly. Other great points that we would want to share is in preparation post-funding on your loan forgiveness perspective, right? So loan forgiveness itself is a big question mark right now. There's a lot of guidance that we're still waiting on. It's supposed to come out tomorrow, and there's even some debate about some changes to that, probably right now as we speak. That being said, the idea is always going to be the same foundation that the CARES Act put into place originally when it was passed. So we need to make sure that the majority of the amount is used on payroll. Right now, that percentage is 75%. So whatever the loan amount you have, at least 75% of that loan amount needs to go to payroll costs, right? And additionally, the 25% is for those eligible uses that we talked about, but you also have to maintain the same amount of headcount for the period that the bank analyzed over the 8-week period which you're seeking loan forgiveness for. But there's a clarification that was provided over the last week. The headcount rule is only for full-time employees that were on your payroll, right? And we're using the ACA definition of FTE, full-time employee, which is more than 30 hours a week of service. So if your total number of employees could be, let's just say 10, right? But if only 5 of those meet that full-time employee category, then that is the headcount rule, the benchmark that the banks are going to be utilizing to make sure your headcount has not shrunk. So you can, in theory, have 5 employees during the 8-week period, all of them full-time, and your part-time staff has not either been reduced or no longer a part of your staff. You still meet that 100% from a headcount perspective. But remember, you have the 2 tests. You have that 75% usage, but also the headcount rule only applying to full-time employees. What my recommendation as well is, if you already have a PPP loan, communicate with your banker frequently. Right? Information keeps changing and the rules keep updating. And I know it's frustrating that the amount of information might not be sufficient, but that is the same information that we are all dealing with. But the incentive, I can tell you, and Alex can back me up, is every bank wants the same exact thing. They want you guys to have the maximum amount of loan forgiveness possible. We all want every small business to get 100% loan forgiveness across the board. Our incentives are completely aligned. So we are on your side. And in order to accomplish that, most banks will be sending out information once it's readily available on how to apply, what documents you're going to need to submit to the bank to make that process simple. And then you communicate that prior to your completion of your 8 weeks. You're technically applying for forgiveness after your 8-week period has finished, but you can start providing that material beforehand, right? It's an easy way to communicate with the bank in a period where you know that the amount of volume of requests is not inundating the bank personnel. And it can also secure an understanding on whether the documentation providing is adequate or not, right? So all of this information is critical, and the communication pathways need to be, open for the most part. Alex, is there something else that you want to talk about? Because I see several questions popping up. I think that we can address them one by one.
Sure. Javier, let me just say thank you, Javier. This has been great. I'll turn it back to you on the questions here now. But look, one of the questions that keep popping up, Javier, is can I apply to any bank? Yes, any FDIC bank, anyone. Just pick one here in town. We got so many in Tallahassee to choose from. And they're all willing and ready and able to serve you. As Javier said, if you have a relationship with one of the banks, that helps. But at this point, look, just go. Just whatever it is, but go this afternoon, right after this meeting is over with. or certainly first thing tomorrow morning, because, you know, again, every day that goes by, on average, the fund is being depleted between $1 billion and $1.5 billion each and every day. But it's hard to predict that as small businesses across America keep applying for this type of loan. So I want to make sure that Florida gets its fair share as the third largest state in our country. And you know, and this will help provide liquidity to help those, you know, self-employed people too, as Javier said, not just small business owners. So that's critical. So Javier, can you go ahead and, Dana, is that okay that Javier jump on a couple of the questions here?
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Javier, please.
Right.
I'll add something if need be.
Fantastic. So first question I saw on the group chat, for 501c4s, if they can apply. The guidance that I've seen, and I've actually uploaded in the group chat some documents. Actually, I think they went to Ben privately. I resent to the group. But there's documents on how to apply directly. But the 501c3 and 501c19 are the only 501 entities that we've seen that are eligible at the moment. In the FAQs that are provided by the Treasury, there's guidance on this. So I'll share that to the group momentarily. And then I also will share straight from the Treasury a breakdown of how to calculate, depending on your filing status and the type of, either you're an individual, sole proprietor, or a company, how to apply and how to calculate all the costs. So it's a step-by-step guide. And the beautiful thing is all the banks are using the same rules, right? Interpretation might be different from bank to bank, but if you follow the rules from the Treasury, then you are doing exactly what you need to do, and there's no reason why a bank should not accept your calculation based on that information. So that was one of the questions. So the forgiveness component, although the guidelines are coming from the Treasury, they're the same rules for all the banks. That decision will happen at the bank. So that's one of the reasons why you need to have an open communication with your banker, because that way their interpretation and the way that the rules are coming in, you want to make sure you guys are perfectly aligned, because we, the bankers, are not packaging this up and sending it to the SBA. We independently have to make sure that we're meeting the SBA guidelines and approving the forgiveness accordingly. So, and I believe the majority, actually, I think Alex can attest, the majority of all Florida banks are still accepting PPP loans.
Yes.
Although the expectation was that the loans would be drying up by now. I mean, there's over 100, close to $120 billion still available. And I think that has to do with a lot of, I was reading a few articles today about some of the uncertainty and some of the issues that the stigma from some of the big companies. So that, if that happens to them, that's fine, but that leaves the door open for small businesses, right? The true people that really need the funds, that's what this money, this last $120 billion should be dedicated to. And that's why it's imperative that if you haven't done so already, we can get those applications in. I'm trying to see if there's any other questions. Yeah, you don't need to have staff. You don't need to have employees. If you run your own business and you're self-employed, it's going to be based off of your earnings from 2019 from a sole proprietorship perspective. So if you made money, then you can apply for a PPP loan. I hope that helped. Okay, so the definition of need. So what's interesting, once again, these rules keep updating on a daily basis. There's a new FAQ, frequently asked question, that came out last night from the Treasury, which specifically talks about defining need. So the definition now has not been truly met, as far as, not met, but defined on what need is, but now the threshold of how much due diligence the bank has to do has been moved up, which means that the SBA has clearly stated in that FAQ that if your loan request is under $2 million, the SBA is going to assume that your need is legitimate and that you don't have access to funds outside. If your loan request is above, all of those requests are going to be reviewed by the Treasury. So in the event that the need is determined to be insufficient, then the next step, it would be that entity would need to pay back the funds. And in the event that they can't pay back the funds, then the Treasury will use every form that it has to recuperate those funds directly from that entity. So from a need perspective, you're going to be able to, if you're under 2 million, which I would assume the vast majority of you are, then you should have little concern as long as you legitimately had some sort of impairment or some sort of impact from the virus, which I think everyone has at this point in our country.
And Javier, let me just say this, Javier and Dana. Believe me, we've been very critical of the Small Business Administration. When this was rolled out April 3rd, it was hell on wheels. A lot of people couldn't get onto their system. But after the dust settled, after a few days, let me tell you, it was incredible. It started working well. For something that's a month and a half old, created by the government, at the end of the day, while I was critical at the initial onset, it really has worked well. The SBA last year, through its 7A program, lent out $23 billion through our banks to small businesses. This is a agency now that was expected to lend out over $600 billion in a month and a half. So you can imagine they were just overwhelmed, incredibly overwhelmed. But like I said, after initial criticisms, both publicly and privately, the things have gone well. So bankers like Javier and bankers on the line here listening today have been able to process the PPP loans for their small business in their community. Right, Javier?
100%.
Javier, this is Sammie. May I add one thing?
Yes, sir.
The risk at this point with the new safe harbor ruling that came out last night is you wind up with a loan for 2 years at 1%. So that that was taken off the table on, as he said, what's needs met and what's adequate liquidity. So that is a very, very strong piece in this.
And as Javier said, and Sammie's alluding to everybody on the call, I think our our government doesn't want those that really don't need this to get this, and so that's why these what Javier called FAQ, frequently asked questions. We get these all the time. Every other day, the SBA's issuing a new guideline that we gotta put up with and listen to and read. But we're doing it to make sure that we meet your needs, right, Javier?
100%. At the end of the day, we understand that small businesses account for more than 50% of all employment in our country, and account for more than half of all GDP activity. So, big business is great, but at the end of the day, you can't have big business unless you start with small business, right. And it's the backbone of our great country. So, if we, we as bankers feel honored that we have the ability to help our small business community in the time of need. And I know that we've been working, and I know Sammie can probably allude to this. I've never worked longer hours in my life in the past 6 weeks. And
right.
And one of the saddest days I had was when the first round of funding ran out after I think it was 12 days. And I had over 150 businesses that were not funded from that round. And I had a lot of hard conversations about with every one of those clients, and regretfully, we weren't able to help them. Thankfully, with the second round, every one of those customers and several more were helped. But what I don't want to have is more conversations with people who missed out, especially those businesses that have the capacity and the need to do so. It's paperwork, and there's work to be done, but take advantage of it, because ultimately it's designed. If we help you stay in business and keep your employees on the payroll, once this epidemic is done, then we could snap back as quickly as possible, right? And that is the hope and spirit behind the program. And I know every banker, once again, we are all aligned in interest. We want to make sure, you get your money, the maximum amount of money that you can, and that all of it is forgiven if possible. And that is our goal, and that's what we want to do for every one of our clients.
Dana, you want to open it up for questions now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's one on here you may have, that looks like it came in right as you were uploading. So it asks about applying if you're an employee of a single member LLC. I'm not sure if you.
Yes. So if you are an employee of a single member LLC, assuming that you are the owner of that single member LLC, you can apply. If depending on, you know, the employee, is he paid through W-2 wages, is it 1099 wages? The mode of application might be slightly different, but that employee should have PPP funds allocated for them. On that, how to calculate loan amounts, a PDF I just uploaded, that individual should be able to look under the LLC designation. It all depends on your tax filing. If you elect to be taxed as a partnership or any other status, that document breaks it down step by step on where to look and how to do it and what the total should be.
Okay, if there's anybody that has a question that you would like to ask that you didn't put in the chat, feel free to either raise your hand and we can work through it that way, or unmute and ask away. Well, you guys might have done a great job.
Well, you can see, Dana, that Javier really knows, being one of the top 10 SBA lenders in the country, certified by the Small Business Administration, as are many other banks. But Javier has been doing this with me now for 2 months, and you know, chambers around the state have done it just like you guys are doing it right now, and this is important. And really, I can't emphasize, Dana, you know, I know it's difficult. Nobody wants to deal with the government. You know, none of us want to go to a government office for anything because it's always a pain in the neck. But really, you should do this. The banks will upload your loan, and, you know, 48 to 72 hours, you know, you'll get confirmation that everything is okay, if not sooner. Let's get through this crisis. Let's get to the other side as we begin to reopen our state.
Well, also note, I know Ben Graybar asked a question early on, if somebody, if you guys are paying attention in the chat, excuse me, which local banks, and I know we have Prime Meridian and Capital City Bank that are on the call today that both said that they were still accepting. So you guys know that, you heard it here. But again, local lenders and the upload documents that Javier uploaded, I'll download those as well and send them out via email to everyone who registered. There might be a few that maybe couldn't jump on. So also, we are recording this, so we'll get that on our website as well, and send it to you guys to have to listen to again.
You know, I see
anybody else got any questions?
I see Will and Sammie on, and there may be other bankers on, but all our FDIC banks are ready to help you process your loan.
I want to say one thing, Dana, is those of you that tried or heard of nightmares about this at the very beginning, don't hold too much grudge against the banker or the bank. This was, as the deputy secretary or whatever the lady's title is for the SBA, on a webinar that I was on, actually made the comment that we are building an airplane while trying to take off. And it was a mess like I've never seen. As Alex says, it took a lot to get to this point where we're at now. And the process is extremely easy. And the only thing I will tell you is you must keep good documentation as you go through and burn this money off that you brought in, because it's going to be the documentation that helps determine the forgiveness. So that would be the only piece that I would really want to emphasize. And Dana and I have been on a lot of conference calls together, Zoom meetings, and she's heard me say it every time. Mm-hmm. Documentation, documentation, documentation. So wish y'all all the best of luck.
But Dana, this has been great. There's a hand there. Jeremy?
Thanks, Dad. I do have a question. I know on the onset of starting this loan requirement, which we've got, we're in it and everything, but we were in the process doing a workforce reduction where we had laid off one employee. He had filed for unemployment. As to my knowledge, I don't know whether he has even gotten it yet, because you know the problem we're having with the state with the people receiving unemployment at this time. How would that affect us in the loan forgiveness?
Javier?
So if I may, a couple questions. Was this a full-time employee, and was that a full-time employee salary incorporated in your PPP request over the last trailing 12 months?
I don't think he was recorded in the request, but he was a full-time employee.
Okay, so your average headcount over the last 12 months from a full-time employee perspective will be compared to your 8-week period. So, and just to be clear, any deviation isn't all or nothing. So just because, let's just say for argument's sake, your average was 10 last year and you have 9 going forward, right? So your average over the 8-week was 9. You spent 75% on payroll. The other 25% you use on the eligible uses. So you check those boxes. So what happens? So under the headcount rule, based on what we know today, your loan forgiveness, your headcount went down by 10%. Your loan forgiveness will go down by 10%. So that remaining 10% will then become a remaining balance of a loan that you would have to pay back. That payment will not begin until 6 months after the origination of the loan, because your first 6 months are deferred, and then you have 18 months to pay that back. And as Sammie just pointed out, it's 1% interest loan, so that's a pretty good deal.
So follow up, if we added another employee within this 8 weeks, we're good to go?
Yeah, because once again, it's back to the average, right? So
yeah,
it doesn't mean you literally.
If in fact we had laid him off before the even applying for the loan?
If you had, so his salary was included
we had
in the
6. We had 6 employees.
Okay.
We're down to 5. So.
Okay, so if the period that you gave the bank to calculate your loan included his compensation, right? Included 6 people's worth of compensation, the bank's going to be looking for 6 people's worth of salaries during the 8-week period. You don't need to have the same person, right? So if there's legitimate reasons for dismissal or termination, or if the person just resigned, you do have the ability to replace that person with someone else. There's also, just to be very clear, there's been several occasions where people have been trying to rehire their employees, but because of unemployment benefits, they have turned down the opportunity for gainful employment. There's actually, in one of those documents I just sent you, the FAQ, there's a specific section that addresses it. If you offer your employee who is no longer with you their job back, and they decline to come back, and you have to document this, then that person is no longer counted towards your PPP loan forgiveness calculation. So in your particular case, Jeremy, if you had done that interaction with that employee, then you don't have to hire an extra head. You're covered. That one person is no longer considered counting against your PPP loan request. Keep in mind, the second that they do that, the second that the employee refuses to accept their job back, that employee no longer is eligible for unemployment benefits because they had an opportunity to get gainfully employed and turned it down. So this is a little bit of a catch-22 for that situation. So what the government's intention is to keep everyone employed and on the payroll. And if the incentives aren't aligning from an unemployment compensation perspective, there are provisions to help the business owner protect themselves.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
We'll do a little bit more research on our end as far as when all this transpired in the first place, and if we even had him listed at the time.
Good question, Jeremy. That really is good. That might be helpful to other people on the line. And Dana, we love more questions. This is great to help our small businesses right here at home in Tallahassee.
Saw one in the chat that says, what does documentation include besides canceled checks and payroll reports?
So that's going to be on a case-by-case basis, slightly different for each type of entity or company that's applying. But in general, there will be another loan application, but it's going to be a loan forgiveness application that we are pending from the SBA. So that will be given to you to fill out, which will include certifications saying that you used the money the right way and that those were your intentions and all that good stuff. Additionally, that supporting documentation, it all depends on how you use the money. If it was 100% payroll, then we want to see payroll supporting documentation, whether it's from your payroll supporting system, like ADP is a great example, or if you have tax documentation, like your 940s or 941s that can support for that period, or it could even be a P&L for the period that shows those expenses incurred. So the bar of burden of proof, the documentation it's ambiguous because it allows you, the business owner, to provide several types of documentation in order to satisfy that need. So once again, the goal is to make it easy. So that's why it's not black and white. These are the documents you need. Just leave it open-ended. And once again, it's a bank determination whether that supporting documentation is sufficient. But you keep open communication with your banker. They can give you an idea whether you're working on the right path.
And then
That's your question about FMLA. So there is a provision in the FAQs that talk about FMLA and those costs. And my understanding is that they are eligible, but please confirm with the FAQs on that front.
Yeah, I would assume that they're both a federal thing, so one shouldn't supersede the other. So it should be okay, is what I was banking on, I guess.
Yeah. Trust but verify. I agree with you.
Yes, of course.
Do we have any others? Just checking through to see if we missed anything.
While you're checking, Dana, there's a couple other points that I think are that could be beneficial. Right now, we've been focusing on PPP. There is as part of the CARES Act, there was a provision to allow any SBA loan recipients, so any 7A or 504 loan recipients on the call, your payments from the SBA portion specifically are forgiven for the next 6 months.
Wow.
Automatically, no application required. So that is something that didn't get much attention in the news, but it's been critical for small business SBA recipients at my institution. And just I wanted everyone to know, in the event that they do have an SBA loan, to make sure that you are not being auto debited, because it's being covered by the government, and it's not a deferment, it's actual forgiveness. So it's not being tacked on to the end of your principal maturity. It's actually being paid by the government. And another note to help out as well, any new SBA loans that are originating, we're not talking about PPP, we're talking about regular SBA loans. So if you're a business that's still doing well or operating and you still want to expand, we still want to encourage you to work with your bank, because SBA now has said that if you close before September 27th, the next 6 months of payments are also on them. So it gives you an ability to, if there's something that you're on the fence on and you're still doing okay during this time, it might be a good time to apply for an SBA loan at your FDIC backed institution.
Dana, that is amazing. Javier, thanks for mentioning that. Isn't that incredible? I mean, you don't get that on the 6 o'clock news, what Javier just said, Dana.
That's great information.
That is big time news. I mean, wow.
That's great. I took some 2 notes there, so.
Anything else? This has been great, Dana. I really appreciate the Chamber's leadership, you and Sue doing this for our community. Really, this is fantastic. Right, Kenneth? Isn't this great? Kenneth is right down the hallway from me, but we're on different.
Questions if you guys have them. So keep asking.
Okay.
Well, this has been great. If we get any other questions, sometimes I'll get post questions sent to me. Can I forward them to you guys so maybe you can connect with the individuals asking the questions?
That's correct. Yeah, that's no problem, Dana. We'd love that. Yes. Perfect.
Well, thank you guys so much for doing this. Again, we have recorded it, and I have downloaded the documents that Javier uploaded. And so I will send those out to everyone that was on the call and that pre-registered for the event. So thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks, Dana.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Have a great day.
Okay, you too.
Likewise.
Thanks, Javier. Thank you. See you, Kenneth.
Always.